The person you love was drunk with their friends last night. Then their friend said something about you that you need to know right now. My beloved child. Last night began like any other night, but before the sun had a chance to rise, something happened that quietly changed the direction of a story you don't even know you're part of. The person you love was surrounded by friends, laughter filled the room, music drowned out careful thoughts, and little by little, hidden feelings slipped past guarded lips. Then your name entered the conversation. Everything became strangely quiet for a moment, as if no one expected what was about to be said next. One friend looked directly at them and whispered something so unexpected that the smile on their face disappeared almost instantly. Why did those few words affect them so deeply? What truth did everyone else in that room seem to understand except you? Don't skip, because what happened over the next few minutes revealed emotions that had been hidden for far longer than anyone realized. While everyone expected another joke, the atmosphere changed completely, and the person you love stopped pretending everything was fine. That silence was louder than every laugh that came before it. One friend leaned forward and asked a question no one had dared to ask before. If you really feel that way, why haven't you told them? The room froze again. No one interrupted. No one laughed. Instead, every eye turned toward the person you love, waiting for an answer they couldn't avoid anymore. They tried to change the subject, but another friend quietly replied, "We're not asking because we're curious. We're asking because we can see what this is doing to you." Can you imagine hearing those words from people who know your heart better than anyone else? Stay till the end, because what happened after that surprised even the people sitting at the table. For the first time in a long while, the person you love admitted that every attempt to move on had somehow led them back to thinking about you. They confessed that even when they acted distant, something always reminded them of your kindness, your voice, or a moment they thought they had already forgotten. Yet someone at the table wasn't convinced, and what that friend revealed next threatened to change everything. That final friend had remained silent the entire evening, carefully listening instead of speaking. Then they calmly placed their drink on the table and said, "You're all missing the biggest part of this story." Every conversation stopped. Even the person you love looked nervous before asking what they meant. The friend explained that they had recently learned something about you. Something that completely challenged every assumption people had been making. Suddenly, the room filled with confusion instead of confidence. Had they misunderstood your silence all this time? Had someone else been shaping the story behind your back without anyone questioning it? Something huge is waiting for you, because the person you love realized that night they may have believed words that were never meant to be trusted. But before anyone could explain exactly what had been discovered, another phone buzzed across the table with a message that made every face turn serious, and the first person to read it quietly whispered, "They deserve to know this right now." The phone remained face down for only a second, but somehow that single second felt longer than the entire night. When the screen finally lit up again, the person you love reached for it first, only for their closest friend to gently stop them. "Read it carefully," they said. "Don't react too quickly." Why would someone say that unless the message carried more than ordinary words? As the message unfolded line by line, the expression on their face shifted from confusion to disbelief. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't bad news. It was a piece of information that suddenly connected dozens of moments they had never understood before. Stay with me, because every unanswered question from the evening was beginning to fit together in a way no one expected. The room grew so quiet that even the music in the background seemed distant, and everyone realized they had judged you based on a story that had never been complete. One friend finally broke the silence. "Remember all those times you thought they were ignoring you?" they asked softly. "What if they were protecting themselves instead?" Those words landed heavily. The person you love replayed old conversations in their mind, remembering messages that were never answered, moments that felt cold, and goodbyes that suddenly made no sense. Could every one of those memories have been hiding a completely different meaning? Another friend admitted they had recently spoken to someone who knew a side of your journey that almost nobody else had seen. That conversation revealed you had been carrying burdens without asking for sympathy, choosing silence instead of explaining yourself. Don't skip, because the realization that followed was impossible to ignore. For the first time, the person you love wondered if your distance had never been rejection at all, it might have been quiet strength. The weight of that possibility settled over everyone at the table. No one joked anymore. No one reached for another drink. Instead, every person seemed to be asking the same question without saying it aloud: what happens if we've been wrong this entire time? The person you love slowly stood up and walked a few steps away from the group, staring into the night as memories continued flooding back. Small details they had overlooked, words they had misunderstood, and moments that suddenly carried a completely different meaning. Then one friend called out from behind, "There's still one thing you haven't been told." They turned around immediately, their heartbeat racing, because the tone of that sentence felt different from everything else that had been said. The friend took a slow breath before revealing that someone had been quietly influencing the way people saw you for far longer than anyone had realized, and they finally knew exactly who that person was. A cold breeze swept through the night as everyone instinctively moved closer, waiting for the name that had suddenly become the center of the conversation. The friend looked directly at the person you love and said, "This wasn't a misunderstanding." Someone carefully planted doubts whenever your name came up. The words hit harder than anyone expected. Why would someone go to such lengths to change the way you were seen? What could they possibly gain from keeping two people emotionally distant? The person you love searched their memory, replaying countless conversations that had once seemed harmless. One by one, the pieces began falling into place. Every warning they had received about you sounded strangely similar. Every rumor carried the same tone. Every moment of hesitation now pointed back to one familiar voice. Stay till the end, because the next realization shook them more than any secret they had heard all night. One friend quietly admitted they had noticed something months earlier but never felt certain enough to speak up. Every time your relationship with them seemed to improve, they explained, someone always stepped in with another story. The table fell silent again. Could it really have been that deliberate? The person you love remembered canceled plans, awkward misunderstandings, and conversations that suddenly ended for reasons that never made sense. They had blamed timing. They had blamed distance. They had even blamed you. But now another possibility stood before them: what if none of those moments had happened naturally? What if someone had been quietly steering every decision from the shadows? Don't skip, because the friend wasn't finished. They reached into their pocket, unlocked their phone, and revealed screenshots of old messages that connected events everyone thought were unrelated. Suddenly, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The person you love stared at those messages, unable to speak. Their closest friends exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they had unknowingly accepted half-truths for far too long. Then one friend whispered, "If these messages are real, they deserve an apology." That sentence echoed through the silence like nothing else that night. But before anyone could decide what to do next, another notification appeared on the screen. It wasn't from the person who had spread the rumors. It was from someone who had remained completely silent until now, someone who claimed to know the entire story from the very beginning. Why had they waited until this exact moment to speak? And what truth had they been protecting all this time? As the person you love slowly opened the message, every friend leaned in, knowing that whatever they were about to read could change the way they saw you forever. The message opened with a sentence no one expected: "I've stayed quiet because I promised I would never betray their trust." Every person at the table exchanged uneasy looks. If that was true, then why reach out now? The person you love read each line more slowly than the last, their heartbeat rising with every word. The sender explained that they had watched the misunderstandings grow for months, hoping the truth would eventually reveal itself. Instead, the silence only made the distance between you wider. Could everything have been prevented if just one person had spoken sooner? Stay with this story, because the next few moments forced everyone to question whether they had mistaken your quiet nature for indifference when, in reality, it had been an act of incredible restraint. The room no longer felt like a celebration, it felt like a place where long-buried truths were finally demanding to be heard. The message continued with details only a handful of people could have known. It described moments when you chose not to defend yourself, even though you easily could have. It mentioned opportunities you walked away from simply to avoid creating more conflict. One friend slowly shook their head and whispered, "I never knew they carried all of that alone." The person you love closed their eyes, remembering several occasions when you had started to explain something but stopped halfway, almost as if you believed no one would understand anyway. Why didn't they notice it back then? Why did it seem so obvious now? Don't skip, because another friend suddenly admitted something that changed the entire conversation. "A few weeks ago," they confessed, "I almost told you the truth, but someone convinced me it would only make things worse." That confession left everyone stunned. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, it was filled with regret. Just when the person you loved decided they couldn't let another day pass without finding you, the sender delivered one final sentence that froze the entire group: "There's one thing they still don't know, and if they discover it before you do, you may lose the chance to make things right forever." No explanation followed. No details. Just those haunting words. The person you love immediately tried calling the sender, but the call rang once before ending without an answer. Every friend looked at one another, searching for answers that weren't there. What was this final secret? Why would someone reveal so much, yet stop at the one detail that mattered most? As dawn slowly approached and the night finally began to fade, the person you love made a decision that none of their friends saw coming, a decision that could either heal everything that had been broken, or uncover a truth far more emotional than anyone was prepared to face. Before anyone could question that decision, the person you love quietly gathered their things and walked toward the door without looking back. One friend called after them, asking, "Where are you going at this hour?" They paused only long enough to answer, "I've spent too much time believing stories. Now I want the truth from the only person who actually lived it." Those words changed the mood completely. No one tried to stop them. Instead, every friend realized this was no longer about gossip or misunderstandings. It was about finding answers that had been buried beneath assumptions for far too long. But as they stepped outside, another thought crossed their mind. What if they were already too late? What if the silence between you had lasted long enough for you to believe they would never come back? Stay till the end, because the next discovery made their journey far more emotional than they expected. The streets were almost empty as memories continued flooding back with every passing minute. They remembered the times you smiled even when something seemed to weigh heavily on your heart. They remembered moments when you looked as though you wanted to say something important but chose silence instead. Why hadn't they asked one more question? Why had they accepted easy explanations instead of trusting what they saw with their own eyes? Then, just as they reached for their phone to send you a message, another friend rushed outside and called their name. Breathing heavily, they handed over a small folded note they had completely forgotten about. "Someone gave this to me weeks ago," the friend admitted. "They said I should only give it to you when you finally started searching for the truth." The person's hands trembled as they unfolded the paper. It wasn't long. Just a few handwritten lines. But every sentence seemed to speak directly to their heart, revealing that someone had expected this exact moment long before it happened. They read the final line twice because it was almost impossible to believe. If you're reading this, it means you've finally stopped listening to everyone else. The person you love stood completely still, unable to speak. Their closest friends watched from a distance, sensing that something much deeper than regret had taken hold. Who wrote the note? How could they have predicted this turning point so perfectly? Then the phone vibrated once more. This time it wasn't an unknown number or another hidden witness. It was a location pin sent without a single word attached. The person you love stared at the screen, and one friend quietly whispered, "I think that's where every unanswered question ends." But as they prepared to leave for that mysterious location, they noticed one detail on the map that made their heart race. Someone else had already arrived there before them, and that person appeared to have been waiting for a very long time. The engine started, but no one spoke during the drive. Every mile seemed to pull the person you love closer to a truth they had avoided for far too long. They kept glancing at the location pin, wondering who could possibly be waiting there before sunrise. Was it the mysterious sender? Was it someone connected to the rumors? Or was it someone who had quietly watched this entire story unfold without ever stepping forward? The questions refused to leave their mind. As they finally turned onto a quiet road, they noticed a single car already parked in the distance. Its headlights were off, but someone was standing beside it, calmly waiting as if they had known this moment would come. Don't skip, because what happened next wasn't loud or dramatic, it was deeply personal, and it changed the direction of every conversation that had come before. As they stepped out of the car, the waiting figure smiled gently and said, "I was beginning to wonder if you'd ever stop listening to everyone except your own heart." Those words immediately erased the tension in the air. The person you love didn't ask who had spread the rumors or why everything had happened. Instead, they asked only one question: have I misunderstood them from the very beginning? The figure looked down for a moment before answering. You misunderstood their silence, not their heart. That single sentence struck harder than any accusation ever could. Can you imagine realizing that the person you cared about had never stopped valuing you, even while carrying burdens they couldn't explain? Stay till the end, because another truth was about to surface, one that none of the friends had discovered the night before. The waiting figure quietly revealed that you had once made a decision that protected the person you love from unnecessary pain, even though it cost you the chance to defend your own name. For several long moments, the person you love couldn't find the right words. Every memory now carried a different meaning, and every silence felt filled with sacrifices they had never noticed. Then the waiting figure reached into a small envelope and handed over one final item. "This belongs to you," they said softly. Inside was something the person you love recognized instantly, a keepsake connected to a memory only the two of you shared. It proved beyond any doubt that your feelings had been genuine all along. But tucked behind that keepsake was another folded piece of paper with just one handwritten sentence. "Before you come looking for me, there's one truth you still haven't uncovered." The person's heartbeat quickened. If everything else had already been revealed, what could possibly remain hidden? And why did it feel as though this final truth would be the one that changed both of your lives forever? The handwritten sentence refused to leave their mind. They read it again, then a third time, hoping another meaning would appear between the words. But it remained just as mysterious as before. The waiting figure quietly said, "If you want the complete truth, stop searching for what people said about them. Start asking why they never defended themselves." That question echoed through the silence. Why would someone willingly carry blame they didn't deserve? Why would they allow others to believe the worst instead of speaking one simple sentence that could have changed everything? The person you love suddenly realized they had been chasing the wrong mystery all along. It had never been about rumors. It had always been about the reason behind your silence. Stay with this story, because the answer waiting ahead was more emotional than anyone at that gathering could have imagined. The waiting figure slowly unfolded another memory that had remained hidden for months. There was one evening, they explained, when they had every opportunity to clear their name. Everyone was ready to listen. But just before they spoke, they looked across the room, saw what you were already carrying on your shoulders, and decided they wouldn't add another burden to your life. The person you love stood frozen. Could someone really choose to be misunderstood simply to protect another person's peace? Every painful memory now looked completely different. The unanswered messages. The unexpected distance. The quiet goodbyes. None of them had come from a lack of feeling. They had come from a decision you believed was kinder than forcing someone you cared about into even more emotional conflict. Don't skip, because one final piece of evidence was about to erase every remaining doubt. The waiting figure handed over a sealed envelope that had never been opened, saying, "This was meant to reach you long ago, but someone made sure it never did." With trembling hands, the person you love carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written entirely in your own words. There were no dramatic promises, no accusations, and no attempts to make anyone feel guilty. Instead, every line carried quiet honesty, explaining that if life ever created distance between you, you hoped they would one day discover the truth without anyone being forced to choose sides. As they reached the final paragraph, tears quietly filled their eyes. Then they noticed something unexpected written beneath your signature. A date that hadn't arrived yet. Confused, they turned the letter over and found one last note in the corner. If you're reading this before that day comes, then someone has finally decided to tell you what was supposed to remain hidden until we met again. The person you love looked up in disbelief. If that meeting had already been planned long before all of this unfolded, then who had arranged it, and why had they believed this exact moment would eventually bring both of you back to the same place?